Communications Minister Michelle Rowland has said that the government will release a comprehensive response to the parliamentary inquiry into online gambling harms by the end of the year. With the two final sitting weeks of the year beginning next week, that means we're likely to see that response very soon. In September, you might remember we spoke to Kate, whose name we changed to protect her identity, whose brother suicided after sports betting agencies continued to send him betting offers after he self-excluded from gambling. Kate's family say that he was hounded to death. Kate fears that the government won't bring in the full advertising ban that was recommended by the Murphy Review when it announces its response. I spoke with her earlier. Kate, thanks very much for talking to us.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me back.
Since we last spoke on air in September, you tried to get meetings with both the Prime Minister and the Communications Minister to urge them to bring in a full gambling advertising ban. Tell us what's happened since then.
Well, I was successful in getting a meeting with Minister Rowland's advisor, not herself, which was helpful. And I just want to acknowledge that advisor was really responsive and genuine. But I wasn't successful getting a meeting with Anthony Albanese or his office. So another advocate got a meeting and he invited me along, which was really generous. We basically just wanted to ask the question that do you have evidence to support a partial ban, because that's what we're hearing is happening. And the answer was we can't share that this isn't a hearing, basically just dismissed in that sense. And it was basically a meeting which involved, we're working really hard. You need to trust us. That was the general feel of the meetings, but we don't trust the process, obviously.
Did they seem to suggest they had evidence that a partial ban will work?
Yep. One of the advisors said, I sincerely believe a partial ban will work. And I was like, great, I want to be proven wrong. Please prove me wrong. And I just said, I want to be thanking you, not criticising you. Please show me the evidence. And they said, we can't show you the evidence until the reform is released. And I said, is this evidence in line with the Australian Medical Association, or who are these experts that are informing you? Because I know the Australian Medical Association said a partial ban is no ban at all. And every public health expert I've looked at and that's publicly available have said a partial ban won't work. So I said, is there something we're missing? Has something come up since the report was released? The Prime Minister's advisor said they have an expert panel. I was like, great, who's on the panel? And I guess that's just when the wheels fall off and you don't get an answer. Very difficult to get a yes or no answer from politicians, as I've learnt.
I wanted to ask you about why you wanted to meet with the Prime Minister. Did you want to tell the Prime Minister about your brother's story?
Yeah, I just genuinely thought if I sit face to face with him, maybe he'll actually understand, because it doesn't seem like he understands. But if we normalise this addictive product, then more people are going to suffer. That's just a fact. And, advertising causes normalisation. That's what the evidence says. That's why I want to keep fighting. And, my dad says things like, before I met the advisor from the Prime Minister's office, he said, tell her we'll do a hunger strike. Tell it what will it take? We'll do anything, because he doesn't want other families to feel this way. And then my sister said, if we can just stop one family from feeling this way, keep trying. We have to try. So, that's why I keep trying, to be honest.
The Prime Minister and the Communications Minister have met with industry groups. They haven't met with you. You've been able to meet with their advisors. Do you think they should have put the time aside to meet with you if they can meet with industry groups?
100%. I mean, look, I'm not going to underestimate how busy they are. I understand that, but this is important. And it's really difficult to deliver lived experience evidence secondhand, because both advisors are, we'll pass on the message. I'm like, what do you mean? How do you pass on that message? Do you know what I mean? With that impact. And I think, going back to Peter Murphy, they were just so respectful. That whole committee really, understood how difficult it is for people to come forward. And I think not just me, there's so many amazing people trying to make change.
On Radio National Breakfast, we're talking to Kate, who we first spoke to in September. She gave evidence to the parliamentary inquiry that Peter Murphy chaired into the online harms of gambling. And Kate has subsequently, after we did that interview with Kate in September, tried to meet with the Prime Minister and the Communications Minister and tell her family's story about what it was like to lose Kate's brother to suicide. He had a gambling addiction in relation to sports betting. Kate, the government has been saying that there could be unintended consequences of a ban, and the industry is saying it could cause newsrooms in regional Australia to shut down without that advertising revenue being generated. Do you understand the concerns being raised about a full-scale ban?
I totally understand, and they're totally valid. And Peter Murphy understood as well. We're not saying people aren't working hard, and we're not saying there's not going to be consequences, but we're saying the consequences of what's happening right now without a ban are far more devastating. And there's ways to support, free-to-air TV or whatever the argument is with not implementing a full ban. I genuinely think the people arguing against a full ban must not understand. Like myself, I didn't understand before my experience with my brother. And I'm saying there's no shame in not understanding, but learn and understand that your job is to protect the people you represent. And Peter Murphy said in her own words, the harm from ads is not worth retaining ads. We understand there's a cost, but that cost right now of people's lives, 20% of suicides attributed to gambling, that cost is far too high. And we understand there's another cost with the full ban, but it's worth it.
What about the argument that this change is a start, that you never get all the changes you want in a situation like this, that a partial ban is better than no ban, that it's a good start? What do you say to that?
Well, I think, look, I'm not an expert. I'm just someone that's accidentally become so involved because of tragedy. And I'm just trusting the experts. And the Australian Medical Association said a partial ban is no ban at all. We've seen what gambling companies do with loopholes. If anyone's interested, read the report. I'm not trying to make this up and back myself, validate myself. I'm basing this all off the evidence. And, sometimes when I do hear Anthony Albanese speak, I think, has he read the report? I genuinely think that, or maybe even just a summary, because Peter Murphy stated it was bipartisan support, not one MP dissented. So they all said, no, that's perfect. We're not going to disagree with the recommendations. And I guess that's where I'm coming from, is I'm just saying my experience is the worst case scenario, but this is what the evidence says.
You said when you gave evidence to the inquiry that you felt Peter Murphy listened to you.
Yeah.
Here's what she said in Parliament 6 weeks before she died about the need to ban gambling ads.
We have to get rid of them from our television screens, from our radios, from online. They target people who are vulnerable, they target young people, and the harm from gambling is not worth retaining gambling ads in our advertising system.
Peter Murphy is the one who chaired that cross-party committee that weighed the evidence and came to the conclusion that we needed to have a full-scale ban on gambling advertising. Do you think Peter Murphy's colleagues in the Labor Party have listened to her in the way they should have?
It's so hard to understand because, I'm not there, I don't know, but it's just, that clip you just played, it's like she died 6 weeks later. She had nothing personal to gain. I have nothing personal to gain. Advocates don't have anything to gain. They just want to help other people. But I guess, I can imagine it must feel pretty wrong to go back on what Peter Murphy asked and the evidence shows. And, something else that I found really interesting was political donations to both major parties have gone up 600% in the last 10 years. So $66,000 in 2013-14 to $488,000 in the last financial year. Is that what we're missing? Do you know what I mean? I failed to understand the disconnect between what Peter Murphy and her inquiry found and the action that the Labor Party's taken now.
Labor wants to ban under-16s from social media platforms. Mm-hmm. They've announced this policy last week because they think those platforms cause harm to children. Mm-hmm. Do you think the same logic should be applied to gambling ads, that they're not played in time slots where children of that age are watching TV or online when it comes to accessing digital content?
Yeah, it's bizarre. I agree with that ban. I think that's great. I'm a high school teacher. I definitely agree with that just from anecdotal experience. But, how bizarre is it that we would lead the world with gambling losses and lead the world with social media restrictions at the same time? Because there's no other country in the world suggesting this restriction. And I think that's great, lead the world, that's amazing. But, do you find that bizarre? I just find that so bizarre that, when obviously, they're pretty overwhelmed with work at the moment, the Labor Party, and trying to get this legislation through with gambling harm reduction. And then coming out with this ban, it's okay, great. But, it's quite hard to understand how such a huge gesture would be made at the same time that we're losing $32 billion a year and there's inaction in that area. It's quite hard to understand.
Kate, we really appreciate you talking to us this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Steve.
That is Kate, whose name we've changed to protect her identity. She was hoping to speak to the Prime Minister and tell him about her brother, who took his own life following a gambling addiction. She gave evidence at the inquiry led by Peter Murphy into online gambling harms. We're expecting a response from the government in the next couple of weeks in response to the Murphy review. On Radio National Breakfast, it's 16 minutes past 8 o'clock.